Hello. If you're interested in hearing specialists' opinion on potential sustainable EU regulatory support approaches for microbials, then you're watching the right video. My name is Vincent Dreze. I am the Managing Director of Eurofins Agroscience Regulatory. We do provide regulatory advices to companies looking to get registration or re-registration of conventional and biological active substances and formulated products in the EU, but also globally. Today, I will be interviewing my colleague Joachim Rumbolz. Joachim has a PhD in biology from the University of Constance with a specialization in plant pathology. He has been engaged in EU regulatory affairs for about 18 years now, working as a consultant in several functions to support industry in the registration of active substances and formulated products based on chemical substances, including natural extracts such as botanicals and also microorganisms. Joachim manages registration projects, and one of his key objectives is to advise clients on the best regulatory strategies. Good morning, Joachim. And
Hello, Vincent.
I will start with my first question. So, Joachim, recently the first virtual edition of CropLife Europe took place, and at this occasion, industry, farmers, and also the regulators have extensively exchanged about the policies foreseen for the biopesticides in Europe. Farmers do have real concerns about their toolbox shrinking, and both the EU and industries are committed to better support massively investing in innovation in biopesticides and also releasing a fit-for-purpose regulatory framework. And we heard the deadlines such as by the end of Q1 2022. What is your opinion? What is your point of view as a regulatory consultant, Joachim?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Vincent, for your introduction. Yeah, I think it's what you mentioned is a critical point, and as a regulatory consultant, we are naturally ending up in the middle. So we see on one hand the interest of industry and their commitment to develop and register innovative, safer tools for biocontrol. At the same time, there is an increasing focus on the safety assessment of plant protection products, transferring the general concerns of the public about the environmental and health hazards of pesticides, not risks, into legislation. This also affects the biopesticides, so meaning the natural substance such as plant extracts, botanicals, microorganisms, and semiochemicals, meaning the pheromone in particular. So in particular, for the microorganisms, or the microbials, as we term them, there has been a clear trend for a more rigorous assessment during the past years, which mostly concerns the secondary metabolites. So these are either produced during manufacturing or in situ, which means after application of the microbial formulated product. As such, alternatives to the conventional crop protection have become increasingly popular. And this is what Domenico De Serio from the European Commission did show us on one of the slides during the CropLife presentation. The authorities have developed further guidance for the assessment of such biopesticides. Personally, I believe it is fair, as a matter of principle, that the biopesticides are evaluated for their safety to humans, animals, and the environment with a similar stringency compared to the conventional pesticides. However, these active substances have very distinctive properties, and some have already a long history of the use. For instance, microbials, which are currently undergoing the renewal of approval in the EU. So the challenge here is to implement pragmatic approaches without any compromise on its safety and safe use.
No, and I think that when we talk about safety, I mean, all stakeholders agree on the fact that this is the ultimate target, not to compromise the safety. As you said, there are very distinct properties for microbials. And what we heard as well during this conference is that there was a need for specific data requirements and also for the uniform principles. Today, it is a common approach for microbials used as biopesticide to address certain data requirements via scientific literature or data waivers or statements. How do you manage when the approach does not appear to be robust enough?
Indeed, for the registration of new as well as existing active substances used for biocontrol in the EU, this has been the default approach to use to a great extent scientific literature and data waivers and statements. So usually after the overall strategy is developed based on the business objectives of our clients, then the first step is to perform a thorough search in the literature databases for available published literature, as well as information and data that the client has already generated. And then as a next step, we propose to conduct a data gap analysis, which is an inventory, in order to identify where the data requirements can be fulfilled, either with the above mentioned informations or with statements and justification for some non-submission of data. Only when the available information and waivers are not considered sufficiently robust, we advise the client to generate additional experimental data in accordance with the latest regulatory guidance. Giving a sustainable approach, obviously, including peer-reviewed published literature statements and studies conducted by CROs, is a matter of proper interpretation of the data requirements, the application of good regulatory science and experience. The advantage of being part of Eurofins Agroscience services is that this is a CRO that has part of the development of biopesticides, commercial biopesticides, for more than 2 decades, and therefore can offer the required technical expertise. So this is really a unique situation for us. That means we are collaborating very closely with our colleagues from the experimental units, and that provides us with the best conditions as consultants to design and realize exactly those studies that our clients actually need.
No, absolutely. And talking about the needs of the clients, Joachim, there are also the needs coming from the regulators, and we realize that the legislation provides as well measures that are favoring the registration of products defined as low risk. As another category, let's say, and it appears that most of the biocontrol microbials would qualify, but this process has not worked very well in practice. Do you see any improvement going forward?
It's actually true that the EU regulatory process remains complex and burdensome. The situation is actually discouraging some producers, product developers, from applying for registration in Europe, and this is not only true for small and medium enterprises. As a consequence, we see many companies starting the regulatory approval processes overseas and only afterwards focus on Europe. But despite the hurdles in the EU, we all witness that the market for microbials is steadily increasing and growing, and it will continue to grow as a result of the farm to fork strategy as a building block of the European Green Deal. So this market growth should make the decision easier for applicants to face the elaborate EU registration process. So yeah, coming back to your question, so at the country level, the picture is mixed, with some countries clearly leading the way while others are lagging behind, partly also due to lack of resources. Nevertheless, there are clear efforts made at member state level to support producers, for instance, by offering really early pre-submission consultations, even before data are being generated, and technical meetings with authorities, with the biocontrol industry experts to discuss the current issue in the registration process. So this happens, for instance, in Germany. Moreover, there are enhanced training activities for risk assessors dealing with microorganisms, which will be implemented from this year onward, as announced and confirmed again by the representative of the Commission during the Crop Live.
Okay. Joachim, you mentioned actually the farm to fork strategy. We could also refer to the biodiversity regulations. So these are, let's say, development in the regulatory framework that are basically influencing our ways of working. Sorry, what the future developments do you see regarding the registration of microbials as plant protection products in Europe?
I think currently there's significant effort made by IBMA and several regulatory authorities to overcome the regulatory obstacles that are causing the most problems to microbials. This includes, for instance, an update of the data requirements for the microorganisms. The voting is expected in the Standing Committee by the end of 2021, as confirmed by the representative of the European Commission once again during the conference, then the uniform principles as well as the new guidance documents, for instance, how to address the subjects of microbial secondary metabolites and antimicrobial resistance, which were released in October of last year. So although it will take time until the new guidance is applied and checked if it's indeed fit for purpose, we are optimistic that the situation for applicants will improve as a result of these efforts. There will be more clarity for the biocontrol industry on what is actually required. This is the basis for preparing robust business cases for new biocontrol tools from the development until their regulatory approval. So it was actually good to hear during the biopesticide session at CropLife that the Commission and, for instance, the Netherlands, as one of the member states most heavily engaged in microbial active substance assessment, are having the same expectation. In a more general sense, the situation for an individual applicant will also depend on the microbial species to be registered. If it is a new strain of a species that has already been registered before, or one that is commonly accepted to be presumably safe, meaning, for instance, those that are listed on the QPS list that is regularly updated by EFSA, then the registration can be rather straightforward. However, if a completely new species should be authorized, the situation may be different and the registration will become more challenging. Many evaluators in the EU are risk adverse, not surprisingly, as they are under a lot of pressure from government and the public, and they do not want to, and they should also not compromise in terms of safety. Nevertheless, also for such exotic microorganisms, it may be feasible to go through the process, provided there is actually a real benefit for biocontrol, and the efforts to demonstrate safe use are still economically reasonable.
Well, thanks, Joachim. And talking about challenges, we can also discuss about mixture of microorganisms and basically how much more complex is the registration of a product that would be based only on one microorganism compared to a mixture of them. For instance, mixtures of several different bacterial species or mixtures of bacteria and fungi.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. So I think so far what has been approved or what is in the approval process are mixtures of separately fermented strains, whereas what you're referring to is actually a good example where you have a potential clash between innovation on a product level or active substance level and the regulation. So what I mean is if you have microbial consortia that are essentially already co-manufactured, then the situation is different. So at the moment we have approval on the EU based on individual strains, but these would have to be registered separately. So it is most likely not feasible for many applicants, as the costs for really registering microbiomes as a whole is feasible. So this is not only a matter of cost for registrations, where you would have to for approval of the individual strains, but also definitely higher production costs. Yep. So one option is actually for the producers to avoid consortia and rather focus on screening for one singular strain that will exhibit similar properties or efficacy to the consortium.
All right. Thanks, Joachim. So, I mean, up to now we were discussing, microbials in the frame of the pesticide regulation, but we know that microbials can also be registered as plant biostimulants. How do you see possible interactions between both regulations? As today, the data requirements and risk assessment processes are rather different and may have different consequences as well for the producers and the registrants.
Indeed, it is possible to place a plant biostimulant based on bacteria or fungi on the market in the EU with a less complex and burdensome route than would be the case for the microbial pest control agents, being pesticide and plant protection product. With the adoption of the new EU fertilizing products regulation, a clear definition was provided with regards to what will be within the scope of the plant biostimulants and what will be classed as plant protection. Taking into account that a microbial used as PPP, plant protection, would also work as a biostimulant at the same time or vice versa, a decision actually has to be made by the applicants whether to go for PPP or biostimulant status and claim products with one or more functions, one of which is covered by the scope of the Regulation 1107, are plant protection products falling within the scope of that regulation and should be excluded from the scope of the fertilizing regulation. So that means that the decision cannot be an arbitrary choice based on the business objectives of the manufacturer, but instead of the biological properties and activities and effects of the microorganism. Okay. I hope that's clear.
That's very clear. And actually, to conclude this interview, I would have a very last question, Joachim, for an expert that I am not in that respect. How can we distinguish between the direct pesticidal effect of microbials and an indirect effect as a plant biostimulant that is making the plant less vulnerable to abiotic stress or improve the plant nutrition?
That's a good question. So for a microorganism, it might not always be possible to draw a clear line between pesticidal and biostimulant trait. In theory, a bacterium would, of course, have the ability to produce a specific pesticidal substance and at the same time have the ability to increase nutrient use, efficiency of plants, for instance, if present in the rhizosphere. To be able to make this distinction in a regulatory sense, it is, in our view, crucial to elucidate and describe the mode of action of a microbial as clearly as possible. Furthermore, the label claim and the intended uses that are derived from the active principle will determine whether a microbial will be regarded to be within the scope of the plant protection products and plant biostimulants. So according to the EU definition, we have for the plant biostimulants only those microbials that have a sole aim of providing one or more of the following characteristics of plants can be regarded as biostimulants, meaning nutrient use efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, or crop quality traits. In the light of this definition, if a description of a mode of action includes something like making the plant less vulnerable to attack or stimulating the plant to produce native pesticidal compounds, the active principle could be interpreted as including tolerance to abiotic stress, for instance, by stimulating plant defense mechanisms. However, in this case, even if an indirect effect, as it is also in the case of elicitors, the microbial agent would be viewed to be within the scope of plant protection products.
All right. Okay. No, thank you, Joachim. It was very clear explanation. So, Joachim, as a conclusion, I would say that it is clear that while we can all see the willingness of the authorities, industry, and farmers to promote alternatives to conventional agrochemistry, this is definitely a long journey. I think that Eurofins Agroscience Services, as a regulatory consultant, but also as a CRO, is embarking on this journey with enthusiasm, building up the know-how, the capacities and competencies. And thanks for having provided all those answers to my questions. It really represents for us a major strategy development in our services offering. So thank you really much, Joachim, for the discussion this morning. You're very welcome.
Thanks for the questions.
And to conclude, I hope you enjoyed this moment with us. And of course, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to get in touch with Joachim on LinkedIn. You can also contact us by email using the email address regulatory@eurofins.com. And if you want to learn more about Eurofins Agroscience services and the services we can provide, do not hesitate to visit our webpage or LinkedIn showcase pages. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.